Where are we in the GDPR hype cycle? Well, you know what? I mean, we're kind of beyond this now. This is what it was like for the last 3 years or so for many people in this room. Munch's silent scream and all that. But I want to know where we are now in the GDPR life cycle. Well, in a way, it's kind of gone even more crazy, because it's not just everyone's terrified. What's GDPR? When do I have to comply? Have I already missed it? Will I go to jail type questions? Now it's, you know, would you like fries with that sort of level? GDPR is everywhere. And I have a few examples of this. So would you like GDPR with that? Okay, these are some of the ones I found particularly enlightening. Here you are, you go onto Amazon to buy yourself a shredder. And you think, oh yeah, wonderful, it'll do 18 sheets at a go, all this stuff. But if you look at it carefully, it's GDPR compliant. This is no ordinary shredder. And actually, it goes beyond that. So you want a new box to put your hard drives in, you know, network-assisted, a network enclosure device. Guess what? This is also GDPR. It's actually an empty box that you put drives in, but it's GDPR compliant. But my favorite is you can now get GDPR compliant paper clips. So if you really want to go the whole way, if you're afraid you're going to get audited, you think the ICO is coming to see you, get yourself some GDPR compliant paper clips. So let's move on to a slightly more serious note. Now, as you all know, under GDPR, the roles of the controller and processor have evolved. And whereas the processor in the past really just had to do what the controller told the processor to do, processor now has really significant and substantive obligations with potentially large liabilities. And what's more, neither the controller nor the processor can have any confidence that they're compliant without help from the other. And so that's why we started looking, because of this kind of dependency between controllers and processor, we started looking at compliance as a service. And I think one of the many unintended consequences of GDPR is that it's now so challenging to comply as a controller that increasingly, definitely SMEs, but not just SMEs, some large organizations, some governments will be pushed into the arms of the large US tech companies who actually have figured out how to do this for themselves, and are they figuring out how to do it for their customers. So, I mean, I'm not sure that's what the European Commission, the Parliament really wanted, but if you make it really bureaucratic and complicated to comply with a regulation like this, then people will inevitably look to outside providers to help them with some of the technical stuff. Now, in that context, cloud service providers, CSPs I'm calling them, are making claims not only about their own compliance with GDPR, but how they can help their customers comply. So we did a bit of empirical research. We do a lot of these surveys. We're just doing one of 40 cloud providers at the moment. But in this specific context, we looked at 13 of the large cloud service providers, and we looked at their data processing agreements, most of which have been revised substantially because of GDPR. But first of all, what assurances are they giving their customers beyond what's in the contract? And these are the 13 we looked at. Now, anybody want to comment on this in the light of my earlier remark about American tech companies? There are 3 non-American tech companies on this slide. Can you tell me who they are? Yes, you're up there. Arm. Fantastic. Arm is here, General Counsel. Excellent. SAP, thank you. Germany's probably largest tech company, maybe one of the largest tech companies in Europe. OVH. Now, a lot of people don't know OVH. It's quite significant. Can you explain who OVH is? No. Anybody know who OVH is? It's the largest, I think it's the largest cloud provider that's based in France. And they made some very interesting claims when we analysed their documentation, which I may get to later. So I'll just give you a few examples from those tech providers of what we found. And this is not the contracts yet. This is the kind of the marketing statements, the assurances, and so on. AWS services GDPR ready. Well, you would hope that would be the case anyway. But interestingly, along with this announcement, I'd like to highlight the following examples of ways AWS can help you accelerate your own GDPR compliance efforts. And then they give you a list of things that you can confidently tick, they say, if you use AWS. That last one is interesting, and I hope to get your input on this, because codes of conduct are an interesting new idea along with certifications in GDPR that ought to make it easier for a lot of people to demonstrate compliance. Trouble is that the codes of conduct aren't approved yet, so that's a thing we'll come back to. Now, here's another example. This is Google. They've mainly focused on the certification route, the usual SOC 2, SOC 3, and ISO 2717, all that stuff. No time to go into any of this in detail, but I just want to show you how the big tech companies are approaching this. Here's Microsoft, safeguard individual privacy in the Microsoft Cloud, but down here, how does Microsoft help me comply? This is the compliance as a service bit, and their approach is, again, slightly different. They have these areas that you can go into to deal with how do you manage data subject requests of any kind, not just access, data breach notifications, accountability, checklists, all that kind of stuff.